we're closing in on the Christmas holidays here, and tonight we have actually a very special guest uh, that has been making news over the recent weeks, and wanted to bring her on to help everyone understand what this new and important effort is. We have with us Donna Kreitzberg, who is with the Education Freedom for Oregon effort, which is aimed at bringing school choice to Oregon families and bringing focus back that your money and your child is your choice. And so when there was a recent article about this in the in the Oregon Catalyst by Catherine Hickok, this is when I first thought, hey, we got to do this. Well, it finally worked out. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So if we can start out with kind of hitting the treetops here and letting people know what this is, because you've got what caught my attention actually in specific was that there are two ballot titles that you've got that have been approved, but then they've been appealed, I guess, by the teachers unions. And why don't we could you describe what these are about, what they are aiming to do?
Sure. So school choice is basically the word for letting a parent choose the school setting. And there's a 1925 case that came out of Oregon that went all the way to the Supreme Court that basically said that the state cannot force everyone to go into a public school, that the parents do have the control and right to educate their children, and they have the right to send their child to a private school. And our Constitution right now says that the money that we gather to spend on education is only to be spent in public education. It never says anywhere where it has to be only spent in public schools or it has to be controlled by the unions or any of that sort of thing. So we basically wanted to have a situation where we're bringing freedom to parents, the freedom of the choice of the educational setting. We have two measures because last year we had combined them and the secretary threw us out for having combined them. So this year we separated them, rewrote them, added more protections for parents in private schools. And they're basically two sides of basically the same coin, so that a parent can choose which school setting is best for the parent's child. And the parent knows that better than the administrator. So it can be a public charter school, a public traditional school, or opting out of the public system and going into a private school or a homeschool setting. So it's, again, just a way to give the parent the freedom to choose what environment is best for their child, because we just want the parent to have that decision, because it seems like that parents have been sort of shut out from the discussion about what's best for their child. COVID sort of showed us that one size fits all does not work, and there are many children that public education doesn't work for. And so we wanted to basically bring the parents into the fold and let them have the decision. So we have an open enrollment that allows the parent to choose any public or charter school in Oregon. And if that school has capacity and classroom space, the school has to take the child. And then alternately, if the parent thinks that the public school system is not right for their child for many reasons, the parent can opt the child out, ask for some of their tax money back, and that money goes into an account, stops being government money at that point. The parent never touches the money, so there's protections, but the parent can then direct that money be spent at tuition for a non-public, like a private school, homeschool curriculum, education therapy, tutors, computers, national testing, that sort of thing. So we're just giving the parents the choice. We're not changing how any school operates. We're not telling a public school what they can do and what they can't do. And right now, there's no statutory authority for the state to regulate private schools or homeschools, and we're freezing that in place. We're making sure that that doesn't become a thing, so that we're building basically a brick wall between the public side that is regulated and the private homeschool side that isn't regulated. So we're just saying, hey, parents, you decide what you think is best for your child, choose that environment, and then if you want to opt out of the public side, we'll give you some money in an account, because the money would otherwise be spent at the public. And since your kid's not there, you should have that money. And then the parent can use that to meet the educational costs for the child.
So there's two of them. And you said, I know this single subject thing, this is how they often get people, is when they put something together and they say, actually, it has to be two. Apparently it doesn't apply to some people that put in ballot initiatives, but it always seems to apply to anything that might have a conservative or Republican angle to it. Certainly a freedom angle. What are the two initiatives and how are they distinct in what they do?
Okay, and it's actually the thing that threw us out last year was separate vote. And there's actually two things. There's a single subject, which we were clearly within because both of our measures dealt with school choice, but they threw us out last year on separate vote, which is kind of a whole nother legal issue. But anyway, so we pulled them apart. So we have a standalone open enrollment, and we modeled that off of, we had in Oregon from 2012 to 2019, we had open enrollment. So I looked at that statute and I took the good parts of it. And then I also, for the last year and a half, talked to policy wonks and litigators and public interest groups and so forth to gain an understanding of public open enrollment and private school choice. And I talked with all these folks. I looked at model legislation, and we drafted the open enrollment from the perspective of a mom, because I am a mom, and I wanted it to be all during the school year, the same form used in all the different schools, and as easy as possible, because this is something that should be available to a parent to just decide, hey, I'm assigned to a particular school, but for whatever reason, that school doesn't serve the needs of my child. And rather than make the parent drive and move to a new home in a different district, we're just saying you can ignore the boundaries of those districts and choose any school in Oregon. And if you choose a school in a different school district, then after the school district has filled the school with its resident kids, so that we're not displacing anybody, we're just saying once the school is filled up of their own kids, if there are a few spaces left, maybe there's 3 spaces left in the 7th grade and your child is going into 7th grade, you want that school. So basically, unless your child has been expelled, if that school has capacity, they have to take the child. So again, we're trying to do it from the standpoint of offering the freedom of choice to the parent, helping with full employment for teachers so that they don't have schools that are only partially empty when they could be full. So we're helping out the teachers, and we're just making it so that a parent doesn't have to uproot and move to a new location. And it'll also help the housing market, because if you can't move into the immediate district because maybe the houses are too expensive, you can move into the rings of houses in the outer out from that main school, and then be close enough, because the parent needs to provide the transportation to get the student there. So we're not changing how the public school operates. We're not changing transportation. We're just saying, hey, if you've got some space, take a new kid here. And we know we have space because about 36,000 children have left public schools for whatever reason in the last 2 years because of COVID. So for the public open enrollment statute or constitution measure we're bringing, it's again just to provide the opportunity for the parent to choose. And it also obliterates the 3% arbitrary cap on virtual schools, because the teachers union don't like charter schools because they aren't run by unionized teachers, and they are kind of one step toward freedom. They don't have to follow the exact curriculum and so forth. They're given some autonomy. And so the unions insisted on a 3% cap for virtual schools, and we're obliterating that because, look, if there's 10% of the kids that would benefit from a virtual charter school, those 10% should get there. I mean, we shouldn't have some arbitrary block. If that's the best environment for the kid, that's where the child needs to go. Well, so that's our open enrollment. And then the other one says, hey, for a lot of parents, you hear about all these board meetings where parents go and there's a lot of strife and anguish over the curriculum. So there's a lot of parents that don't want their child in public school. It doesn't align with their values. They're being taught things they don't approve of, and just many reasons. So parents can then opt out of the public system. They can choose a nonprofit to administer an account for them. The state then will send them approximately $7,600 per child that goes into the nonprofit, so the state doesn't have hold on anymore, and it's not public money at that point. The parent never touches it, so they can't take the money and go on a cruise, but instead they can direct the nonprofit to have it paid for a myriad of different kind of expenses that allows customization by the parent. So they can pay for private school tuition, they can pay for homeschool curriculum, national testing fees, therapy, tutors, and that sort of thing. So again, we're just trying to make sure that the parent is the decision maker, because the parent knows their child. We're not saying what the parent has to do. We're not saying what the school has to do. We're just freezing in place the regulations, not allowing the state to come over the wall and say, hey, parent, you took this money, we're going to regulate you. That's not allowed. We're protecting the privacy and the autonomy of the private schools and the home schools. So it's both sides of the coin, because I don't know what a parent needs. I only know what my kids need. And so we're not trying to act like a tyrant and say, oh, you have to go here or you can't go there. No, we're just giving them the option to choose, and then have the money follow the child, because that's what the Oregon Constitution says right now. It doesn't say, oh, it can only go to the public schools. It says it's supposed to follow the child and be used for primary and secondary education. That's what our measures will do.
So let me ask you this, because obviously you mentioned how if the open enrollment part of this, that we've got they've got schools that are seeing massive declines in enrollment. Some have even pushed the double digits in some areas of the state, and so they really could use a way for people to fill out those empty spaces. You also mentioned that that's should be an incentive to teachers who want to make sure that that they have the security of knowing that a school could actually be full of students rather than coming up short because of this these zip code limitations that often happen. But then in addition, there's so many of these folks are, as you said, disappointed with the way the schools in their area have been run. And so this will actually make it so that schools that are run better could attract people, right? I mean, this is that first part kind of addresses that.
Right. And the studies have shown that over the last 30 years, they've done studies to show what happens when you introduce private school choice. And it's basically the impact of competition for the first time on public schools. And so for the first time, because of competition, the yellow school bus doesn't just automatically drive up to the door and let out 35 students. But instead, the public schools have to think, wow, if we want to keep these students here, we need to listen to the complaints of the parents. We need to deliver a better product. We need to value our teachers more because they now have the opportunity to jump over and either start their own school or go to a private school. So basically, 25 of 28 studies have shown a positive impact on the educational outcomes of public school students. So for the kids who stay there because they want to stay in public school, they actually get a better benefit and better education also. The teachers benefit, they get higher pay, parents get listened to. And if there are parents that want to pull their child out, that takes away the strife at the school board meetings too, because then the parents are able to take their child to some other environment that aligns with their values. So it'll bring down the temper of all those cantankerous school board meetings. So it benefits the kids who stay in public school, and it also allows the kids who need to leave an escape route. And rather than treating people as second-class citizens, because right now we all have to pay tax that goes to the public education. But then if you wanted to have your child in private school or homeschool, you have to be treated as a lower class citizen, have to write a check again. Why are we creating a two-tier system here? We should have, the goal should be the best education for our kids. And that is using that big pot of money that we have and making sure that it spreads to the child to get the child the best education. So again, that's what our measures will do.
Let me ask you this, because obviously the old canard from the teachers unions is that they claim that, first of all, that second measure is just going to steal money from the public school system. And that's what they say. And they say, we don't have enough money, so it's just going to steal it away, and then the other thing, and this is how things work today, right, is that there's obviously something racist or whatever about people that might not want to be in certain schools because they aren't succeeding, but then they're going to say that this is going to make things worse for kids who are underserved or underprivileged. We hear it all the time, every single day. What is the response that you anticipate that you guys will give to this, so that the very first things that you can easily predict they're going to say can be countered?
Right. Well, the teachers union will claim that the private school choice defunds public schools, but that's a little hard to believe because we've had private school choice now in about 65 different programs across the country, and public schools are not being defunded and they're not going into being obliterated in all these other states. So it's really a misnomer for them to say that, but it's something that can pull at the heartstrings, I guess, of parents. But the studies have shown, and if you look at the spending that we've done in Oregon, the spending for public schools has gone up every year, but our performance, the proficiency of these kids has gone down. And so there was an article from the Oregon Department of Education that had the results for the 22 school year. And for proficiency in English, it was 43.6%. For math, it was 30.4%. And for science, it was 29.5%.
That's
and we're spending
grade level.
Yeah. So, and we're spending about $6 billion a year on our public school students. And this is, after we've been spending more and more every year and having fewer and fewer students. And now the proficiency is less than 44% across the board. So I don't think, it's almost like back from the math class that spending and proficiency are inversely related. The more they spend, it seems to not result in positive proficiency levels. So again, we're not trying to tell a public school how to operate, but we're giving the public the chance to choose what the environment is. And the way that we've designed the private school choice, remember, the money doesn't belong to the public schools, doesn't belong to the unions, it belongs to educate the children. And right now there's about $15,875 spent on a student in public school. Of that, about $14,875 is what's spent from the state, excluding the federal portion. We're only taking about $7,600. So we're taking basically less than half of the money that it right now costs in a public school. And to go put your child in a private school from K through 8, the average price is about $6,000. So we're able to show that basically if we're only asking for about 50% of the money, and that's a lot of money that should be available to our children to get an education. And when a child leaves a public school and they take with them the $7,600, that leaves, basically another $7,400 or $8,000, whatever, that is available then for a child who's already in the private school. They could raise their hand and say, hey, I want my money now. And so it's a revenue neutral to a public school. Little Johnny walks out the door of the public school and he only takes half with him. And then the other half is available to fund a child in the private school or for homeschooling. So, the public schools, to say that's going to defund, it's not, because it's revenue neutral. They don't have the responsibility at that point to fund or to take care of little Johnny, and it hasn't hurt their bottom line. And the amount that we're asking for is less than the variable cost. They say, well, when we get a new student, we need more money. Okay, so you need a variable cost of $8,300. And then by the same token, when the kid's not there, they don't need that 83, and we're only taking 76. So it's pretty disingenuous for them to complain it's going to defund public schools. We know that pouring more money in isn't helping. So let's try another option and give parents alternate education sources.
Well, it almost sounds like it could be profitable to the schools for students to leave and go into private schooling, because they would get to keep a chunk of every allotted amount, the variable costs, as you said. And
well, and it does. The studies do show that most studies do show that there's a financial savings, because when you take money and you allow the parent to choose how it's spent, most parents are very frugal. And the way that we wrote our private school choice, we said, look, you get this money, you can spend it however you want on the education of your child. And if you don't spend everything that first year, the balance rolls over. So if you have a child that's K through 8 and you're getting $7,600 and maybe it only costs $6,000 to put them in private school, every year you're going to roll over a chunk of money. And then that can be used when private school gets a little more expensive in the high school years. But again, if you're frugal and you have anything left over when the child completes high school, that money can be used for college or trade school in Oregon. The money came from Oregon taxpayers, so we wanted it to stay here. But now you have a situation where a homeschool child who would otherwise have their parent have to be, paying for it and maybe giving up a job or something like that, they can have this money. And then every year that they don't spend it all, it rolls over and rolls over. And homeschooling is less expensive than going to private school. So a homeschool student who participates in this could have, a $30,000 or $40,000 available to them when the child completes high school. They could use that to become a welder, a carpenter, go to Oregon State, go Beavs, not Ducks. That's just personal preference. But
it would be available to people going to Oregon as well, just to be clear. Yes.
Yes, it can be for college or trade school or something, but it's an opportunity, again, because the focus should always be giving the kids the best opportunity for an education. It doesn't belong to the public schools. It doesn't belong to the unions. It shouldn't be just at a public school living room. It shouldn't just be in a private school room. It shouldn't just be in a home's living room. It's wherever the child gets the best education. We need to always remember that the focus is on the child's education. And if, some public school children leave, then that's fine. And the teachers can leave too. They can start their own, or they can stay there and get a better salary. So, it's the tide that rises all boats, or lifts all boats, whatever that expression is. So again, the focus needs to be on the education of the child, giving the opportunities, making sure the money follows the child to wherever that opportunity is, so that parents aren't treated like second-class citizens. And it also shows that basically, when you give the child the opportunity like this, they're going to probably enjoy school a lot more. And the goal here is to give them a skill set when they graduate so that they can go out and enjoy their life and have a good job. But it also could be that if their education is improved, then when they do go out and start working, they have a better opportunity and chance of getting good employment, and they're less likely to be incarcerated or, robbing and causing all those sorts of things. So it should, over time, reduce the cost overall for taxpayers, because we aren't having to pay for those additional services when the child completes high school. So it's a win, for students primarily, but it also helps the teachers, and it gives the parent their voice in education.
Sounds a little bit like that second part, a little bit like, what is it, a nonprofit administrative educational savings account, because it rolls over. And so it gives them a way to be efficient about what they're doing and effective to the point that they're satisfied with it, but also have means down the road to continue the education in the direction that's best for the child. Now,
and it might be that the teachers unions are terrified that we'll be able to show, look, if we give these parents the $7,600 for their child, now we're going to have a whole bunch of people with money that they can then go shopping with. And there's going to be entrepreneurs that come along and say, hey, now that there's a whole bunch of parents with money, I'm going to start a private school, and I'm going to have a private school that focuses on autism or STEM subjects or math in particular, or maybe the arts and drama, whatever. And so now there's parents with money to be able to fund these things. The entrepreneurial boom for Oregon is going to be fantastic. All these schools are going to sprout up. So maybe there aren't private schools available where the parents living right now, but given time, when these two measures pass and there's enough parents with money to go shopping, private schools are going to say, hey, I can now start and become a school that's viable because there's enough parents with money to pay for this. So it's going to help just sort of the business climate of Oregon too.
Well, and so that other thing that they're going to hit you with, because that's what they say about everything, is that you're going to betray underserved communities and parents with limited means and kids that, might be in a school and feel like they're kind of stuck there while other kids leave. Isn't it true that all of these kids would have the same equal opportunity to take advantage of this?
Well, yeah, the way that I wrote this was it's universal. So there isn't a requirement that you have to be disabled or low income or have been in public school for a while. I wanted it to be across the board. Let's swing for the fence. Let's give this to every child, give them the opportunity, because we don't know which children need it. And there could be middle income parents that are really struggling to be able to afford, and they just can't pull their child out of public school because maybe they're taking care of an elderly parent, or maybe they have medical bills, or we don't know their situation, and we shouldn't second guess that. So we just wanted it to be available to everybody. So if you're in a situation, and particularly this will best serve the low income folks that right now they can only live in one spot, and maybe that school is not the best because of the neighborhood or whatever, and they're trapped in there. That is what is going to be wonderful for them. They can then choose to opt out of the public school, take money with them, and use it to pay for a private school, and their child can just flourish in that new environment. Where right now they're trapped because the parent doesn't have the discretionary money. They can't write another check for a private school. They can't move into a fancy neighborhood. So this is geared, in large part, will really help the low income folks and the underserved. But we didn't want to limit it to that because we don't know the situation of everybody. So we're not going to pick and choose winners. We're going to say it's available to anybody. And it's all voluntary. Everybody can vote in favor of both of these, even if they don't want to use them. It's just sort of as a charitable thing. Look, I don't need to use it maybe, but I know that my neighbor does. So I'm going to vote yes for both of them because I want all parents to have the ability to choose. And on the private school choice, parents can vote in favor of it, and then they don't have to use it, or they can participate. And with the private school choice, in addition to protecting parents in private schools from government regulation, because again, the state can't regulate them right now. We're building this big brick wall between the state and the private schools and homeschools. We're in addition saying that the parents who choose to participate in this and ask for the money to go into a nonprofit, we're also specifically telling the state may not regulate parents in private schools regarding creed, which is how you practice your religion, education practices, which is how you teach your children, teaching qualifications, so that the state can't require a mom of a homeschooling situation to have gone to a woke university and get a woke certificate. No, a mom is perfectly suited to teach the child, or dad, whichever the situation is. Also admission policies and curriculum. So a parent can choose whatever curriculum they want. There's lots of free ones out there. There's also ones that cost money. So again, we are protecting the participating private school and the parents, because we want this to be, this is not a Trojan horse. This is not a trick. This is not trying to hurt and have the state have a way to regulate. We're saying the state has to stay over on the public side, which is what we're all used to. They regulate public schools and they, marginally regulate charter schools, but charter schools are like one step toward freedom. But then they can't cross the brick wall. They can't regulate the private schools. They can't regulate the homeschools. The money is available for the parents to use without the fear that the state's going to come into their living room and say, you have to use this curriculum, or you can't teach this, or blah, blah, blah. We're not going to allow that.
So the state government actually did have a bill, as I recall. If it wasn't in the last major session, it might have been before. They were going to try to take over and regulate all the private schools. I remember, because then there was this messaging that went out. My kids go to a private school, and all of a sudden, the lobbyist for, I think it was some of the Catholic schools, just went to town and said, "Look, we really got to send a strong message here that they mustn't do this." And I think it was dropped, it was defeated. But what are these? Are these statutory? Are these constitutional amendments? Or how easy would it be once it's in there, even though, maybe they should be very careful if it passes handily at the ballot box and people like it, but it wouldn't be the first time that the legislature said, well, we know better than the people, and so we're going to go ahead and undo a bunch of this and mess with it by passing something in the state legislature and having the governor sign it. What is this in terms of how it changes the law, and how easy is it to undo for the state legislature if they wanted to?
Well, what we're bringing are constitutional initiatives, and the Oregon Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That's what we derive all other powers from. So when these two measures are passed, and they will cement the protections and the language into the Constitution, which then cements the protections that are in these measures. And by being the Constitution and the supreme law of the land, once these measures pass, they will nullify existing conflicting laws, and they will prevent future conflicting. And in addition, after they pass, when the legislature comes along and does the implementing legislation, which is sort of filling in all the holes around the edges, none of what they do there can conflict either. So when we say this money, when it goes from the state into the account for the parent, stops being government funds, it stops being government money. The state can't say, well, I'm going to regulate you because you took government money. No, can't do it, because it'll be a constitutional amendment. It'll go into the Constitution. It'll be cemented in there. It'll nullify any laws that they try to pass between now and then, and it'll stop any future laws. And the implementing stuff can't say, well, she might have said that, but she didn't really mean it. Yeah, we really meant it. So it's really there to protect. And we're the only state in the country that is doing a constitutional amendment for school choice. Everybody else has done statutory, and that's great. And they've had the opportunity because they've had enough votes in the legislature. But we've had, years and years in Oregon where various senators have tried to bring school choice measures, and they can't even, I don't know politics, but they can't even get them down off the shelf to be read on the floor, to be talked about, to anything. The teachers union and the people that are against school choice just squash it. So it just doesn't even have a chance. So we knew we couldn't wait around for the statute or the legislature to do a statutory measure, because it just wasn't going to happen. And we knew that school choice is washing across the country. It's going to reach the West Coast. And we wanted to be out in front to put the words in the measures to protect parents, private schools, teachers, and so forth. Because when is the last time the legislature has done anything that protects homeschooling or protects parents or protects private school? It doesn't happen. So the way we wrote this was to offer these protections, cement them into the Constitution, prevent the legislature from monkeying with it and ruining it. And, bless the hearts of the states that have statutory measures. They're at risk because they could have a situation. Arizona passed this wonderful statutory measure signed by Ducey, but they're at risk that the next legislature, if they tip the scales and have more anti-school choice people, they could go in and just sort of surreptitiously gut a sentence or two that would basically blow the thing wide open, and then the parents would be not protected. The private schools would be not protected. And so that's just too risky. I'm not going to go through this much work and help all these people and then have it backfire. I want it to be as protective and permanent as possible. So that's why we're doing this, the constitutional. And that's why we're just bypassing the legislature and we're bypassing the governor. We're going to the people saying, look, you can vote for this even if you don't have kids, if you don't want to use it, but it allows the parents to have their voice back. It allows them to basically choose the setting that works for their child, which is a constitutional right anyway. And it allows the money to follow, which is what should happen, because we're supposed to be spending this money as efficiently as possible. And parents have been just sort of, the door slammed on their face or whatever. And we're just tired of that. Parents need to have the right to speak on the child's behalf. And so these measures will do that. They're as protective as possible. I talked, as I say, with like 20 different state peoples and litigators and policy wonks and so forth, looked at model legislation, took the good stuff, took all the protective stuff, amped it up, had a lot of lawyers, constitutional lawyers look it over too, because we really want it to be protective of parents and make the opportunity for the kid to get their best education.
I think I addressed a few of the questions that people were asking here in the Facebook live feed. One person said I would happily donate to those types of education settings. I think she's talking about making sure that not only there's options for kids, but frankly, I think there's folks saying that they'll vote for it and support it. One of the things that is if they pass it, can Kotek deny it? The governor-elect.
It doesn't. It's a constitutional measure. It doesn't need Kotek to sign anything.
Yeah, and you can't blame people for being a little paranoid about what could happen with something that is this good, because
right.
we're used to not being that satisfied.
I know. Usually, if it's too good to be true, it is. But this one really is true, because we, as the citizens, the moms and dads and grandparents, we sat around and we drafted this. We drafted this with our kids in mind, not because we're legislators or politicians or all that kind of junk. We're just parents and grandparents who love our kids and want them to have the best opportunity. And we knew we couldn't wait on the legislature because they're not going to do it. And our kids can't wait any longer. I mean, they've had the COVID shutdowns, they've had the learning loss, they've had, all these issues thrown at them. And these little kids are innocent. They need to be protected. And they have, every day goes by, they're losing an opportunity to learn. And if we could have brought it in 22, we would love to have, but the process, unfortunately, to bring a constitutional initiative is very cumbersome and clunky and just takes time. But speaking of the lady who would love to donate, we would love donations to our Education Freedom for Oregon site, because we have to raise about $15 million to do this campaign for the next 2 years, which seems mind-boggling. But basically, in order to stay toe-to-toe with the teachers union, who's going to dump bazillions of dollars from all across the country, because if they lose Oregon to freedom, it's going to be then a measure that can be taken to all these other states. I have, state people calling me now saying, hey, what are you doing out there? Can I have your documents? And I'm like, sure, here, take them. So we need money. We need money just to pay for postage, to pay for training of signature gatherers. We have to, I guess I should back up too. So we got, the Attorney General gave us certified ballot titles. The Secretary of State acknowledged our measures were constitutional. We were all excited thinking, yay, we can go out and get the signatures. And then bam, the bigwigs at the teachers union sued, mostly to stall us, mostly to burn daylight in the time period we have to gather signatures, because they're bringing the same old arguments they have been. The world's going to end, people are going to learn the Bible, all these horrible things are going to happen, which is kind of crazy. But so it basically is a stall tactic by the teachers union. So we're held up for a while. During this time, we're basically reaching out to folks to say, hey, would you help us gather signatures? Would you help donate? Would you help us just be a volunteer? We've got lots of different roles, because it's a citizen, truly grassroots. It's just moms and dads and grandparents doing this to help our kids. So people can go to our website, educationfreedomfororegon.com. We've got a link there for donate. If you can give us 15 million, that would be awesome, because then we'd have all our money. We can do all our advertising, but any amount helps. And if you can volunteer to help us with your time, that would be awesome too. We're just very excited. We have a lot of enthusiasm from parents. Not that we hate public schools, not that we hate private schools, not that anyone's better, but again, just to give the parent the choice to choose that environment and have the money follow the child so the child gets a good education.
So I just posted links both to educationfreedomfororegon.com. I did that earlier in the show, and then I posted it again to the FAQ page if people want to drill down and read more of the details where it talks about what each measure is. And then I also just posted a link to where you can donate, and I will donate.
Thank you.
And I want to encourage everyone else to. And I think that this type of thing can gain momentum as people realize what it's about. What is the prospects? By the way, somebody asked in the feed, are parents still pulling their kids from public school, or has it slowed down? I don't know if we've had more recent data, but if you go back into the summer where they were doing an assessment of enrollment, it clearly, especially the Portland public schools in particular, we're seeing huge declines in enrollment, despite the fact that there's swimming in money that was coming in, some of it from COVID funds, and yet people were leaving. But I think suffice to say that's still happening. I posted a link to how they're dumbing down graduation standards to hide the failure of the schools, and yet parents know, and they know also what they want to make it possible for their kids to achieve. And so if you put it in the hands of the parents, they'll police the system. They'll make sure that their kids are getting the best possible situation. What are the chances that, how soon do you think this will be resolved with the appeals by the teachers unions that obviously are going to be all in? That's why you need $15 million, right? Because
Right.
they're going to spend at least that if they have to, because
Right.
they figure their existential situation is at stake.
Well, yeah, because Oregon, unfortunately, is sort of ground zero for teachers union and the policies that they try to inflict on our schools. And so if they lose to freedom and to parent involvement here, that will be an impetus to have it spread across the country. And there's still a need for teachers union, but they shouldn't be controlling and preventing our kids from getting a good education. So the process, the Attorney General is not a right or wrong answer in how they draft ballot titles. Basically, they're supposed to summarize the caption in 15 words or less to get the gist of the measure. They gave us drafts. We pushed back and said, well, you don't need to have this and you should have this. And we got most of what we wanted, not everything. And then the teachers union sued as soon as we got the final ballot titles, and they're appealing it up to the Oregon Supreme Court. But it's not like the Supreme Court's going to say, well, the Attorney General did it wrong or did it right. It's, did the Attorney General look at all the evidence and look at all the words of the measure and come to a reasonable conclusion for the caption and the ballot title in general. So it's not a hard and fast thing, but again, they've had the same arguments by the union, and the Attorney General's read them several times now, and this is what they concluded. We would like them to have been different, but we'll take them as they are. So the Supreme Court basically doesn't have a deadline to make a decision here, but the process is usually 3 to 6 months. So we're hoping that they'll be done with this and let us pop out maybe the end of February-ish. So as the spring, if we had any snow, the snow will be melted and we'll be ready for spring and be able to go out and start collecting. We need to get 149,210, I believe is the exact number, but you never just turn in that many because some signatures are unreadable, or maybe the person forgot to put the wrong address or whatever. So we're shooting for 250,000 for each measure just to have a huge cushion, so we make sure we've turned in enough. And we have from, let's say, March 1st of 2023 through July 5 of 2024. So a little over a year, which will give us basically almost 2 summers, which is the prime time to be getting it when it's nice and sunny and there's all those events and so forth. But the more people that we can get involved, if everybody were to just go like down their street, most houses have maybe 10 houses, or most streets have 10 houses on each side. Maybe there's 2 parents in each. So you could get 4 sheets right there just going down your street, and that would take maybe a half an hour. So if everybody can contribute time and effort, it's a fun thing to do. It's a nice way to meet people. And it's not like this is, oh, I'm trying to convince you of something horrible. This is, hey, do you want your child to be able to have the best education opportunity and have the money to do that and learn a lot and have a good future life? Yeah. Okay. Well, then here, let's sign these measures. So it should sort of sell itself. Parents are enthused, and we would love any help people can give us.
If people want to be on the list to be notified when the petitions are available, is that also possible on the site here? I see volunteer and I see like sign the petitions, but obviously you can't do that until the ballot title's final.
Right. On the website, there's a volunteer page, or they can just email me at volunteers@educationfreedomfororegon.com, and they can say, hey, I'm Sally Smith and I live in, Clackamas County, and I'd be happy to help collect signatures or do data processing in the back room. I don't like to meet people, but I'm helpful with this, or I love to get out and meet people, whatever. We need all sorts of skill sets. So there's room for everybody here. This is a historic moment for Oregon, and it takes everybody to be able to accomplish this.
Volunteers at educationfreedomfororegon.com.
Yes, the email.
Okay. I just put that in the feed too. Okay. And I think that there's going to be a lot of interest in this. I think that people who don't have kids in school or aren't that engaged in what's going on with what parents have to decide and deal with nowadays. I think I also want to throw out there the idea that we also know that there's a whole generation of kids that are going to one day be deciding what happens with the country. They're going to be voting. And we've seen in this last election how some of the outcomes people were expecting in the election didn't exactly turn out as expected, because there's a whole generation of kids that have gone through schools that have done, well, suffice to say, a lot of political training. Maybe that's a kind word. Indoctrination might be a better word. And if you don't think that's the way, what our system should be doing, if you don't think that they should be focusing on teaching people pronouns, but that match their gender identity, but instead learning English proficiently at grade level, then this is an opportunity for you to strike a blow here for that. Because what was it that you said? Proficiency in math was what, 29% or something?
Let's see on my chart.
Number in the 20s.
Math was 30.4%, English was 43.6%, and science was 29.5%. Yeah. And one thing when Kate Brown obliterated the graduation requirements, and then they started to say, well, all students should be in a math class based on their age rather than their skill set. That scares me, because I want to make sure when I get on an airplane that the guy flying the plane has had advanced math and can do that and knows how to do the plane. Or my doctor, when he's cutting me open to give me heart surgery or whatever, I want the doctor to have done well in science. And so, not every kid's going to do well in science. Not every kid's going to do well in English, but we need to have a proficiency at a minimum. And it's also going to help them in their life, because if they get a good smattering of overview of things while in high school, maybe they'll glom onto something that they like, and maybe they'll go on to college to help in that skill, or they'll go out and get a trade school vocation type thing. We have to help the kids have a skill set, because the worst thing that can happen is they graduate, they didn't learn anything, now they have no skills, and now they're mad because they can only work at a fast food place and not make enough. So they're angry, and they're angry at kind of society, when if we'd given them a better education, they would have realized that, it takes self-responsibility on their part too, but also we're here to help them and give them a good skill set so they can go out and prosper. Because otherwise we're hurting our kids, and that hurts our state, it hurts our country, because they will be our politicians and our pilots and the whole bit. So, as a self-interest for senior citizens, we want to make sure that our kids get a good education.
Yeah, if you want to preserve what's great about the country for posterity, you got to make sure that posterity actually gets the kind of education that could deliver that result. If you want a healthy economy down the road, to be able to pay for all the things that, the costs that are incurred over time, I think this is an issue for everybody. It isn't just an issue for parents. It just so happens that by putting parents first, I think you deliver the best possible result that people can be happy with. And I think all of us will be much happier if they aren't spending time, marching kids around, protesting in favor of Measure 114, when in fact, the 2/3 of the kids aren't proficient at math or science to begin with, but they're proficient in being told what to believe politically. And I know that this is something that a lot of people who watch this show care about, and know that freedom can actually give parents a better choice. So any last thoughts here on what people need to know, what they should be watching for, and what they can do right now to help? And I think you covered a few of these items, but I want to give them one more chance to hear that.
Yeah, so we are Education Freedom for Oregon. You can go to our website. You can sign up to be a volunteer. You can send an email to me directly at volunteers@Education Freedom for Oregon and say what you want to do, what you want to help with, or what your skill set is, and I'll give you some options. We need money. We need a lot of money. We're trying to raise $15 million to stay toe to toe with the union, mostly because the union is going to be sending out information that's incorrect and that's going to be trying to cause fear in parents. When the truth is, this is what?
Misinformation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, this is a good thing for our students, for our teachers, for our parents. It's trying to help them get a good education. And we're not saying that they can't teach such and such at public schools. So if a parent likes the public school and they like the curriculum and they like the activism, they can still do that. And they can go to whichever school that they want in the public system, or they can stay where they're at. So it's all voluntary. A parent can vote in, a citizen can vote in favor of this and not have to use it. It's just to give the parents who do need it, who do have kids, the opportunity to have it. So we need to raise money. We need volunteers. We need, just awareness. If you could everybody that's listening to this could tell 10 people, because we're just about to launch our big campaign here. But up until this point, it's been kind of word of mouth and Facebook. And I have a Donna Kreitzberg Facebook page where I post a lot of articles and people can read information there. But it's just about to, after the election now, and then now after the holidays in January, which will do sort of a big launch. Oh, and I forgot, we have on January 28th in Hillsborough, we're doing a school choice movie called Miss Virginia, which is about Miss Virginia Walden Ford, who back in the 1990s had her student in a public school, and he was just falling through the cracks and doing poorly. So she pulled him out and put him in a private school for a while, but she couldn't afford it. So then she basically launched the whole Washington, D.C. voucher system. And she, with a bunch of other people, she worked for about 10 years, and she got an act of Congress, because it took it that to actually have it happen, signed by President Bush, and she got the voucher program started. So we're going to show that movie in January in Hillsborough, and then we're going to do a Q&A where I'm going to ask her some questions. She's going to detail what her life was like and what happened, but she was just basically a mom at that point, like I am, just saying, hey, we need to help our kids here. So that's a fun event that we're going to do in January to show people that this can happen, it can be done, and it just takes lots of parents and grandparents and neighbors and uncles and everybody to help out. So that'll be a fun thing.
Do you know the location and the exact date of that in Hillsborough?
It's the Hillsborough Cultural Center. We've just finished the flyer for that, and we've just done our Eventbrite, and we're just about to, I'm going to probably post about it tomorrow. So just kind of giving a sneak preview of that. January 28th, noon to 4 in Hillsborough, and I'll be about to post it, and we'll put it on our website, and so everybody can find it. So we're doing a live showing of the movie, and then a Zoom, because she lives in Tennessee. She's going to Zoom in, and we're going to do a Q&A. We're going to tape the Q&A, so in case parents can't actually physically come to the Hillsborough location, we will show the Q&A for them later, and then they can just stream the movie themselves on Hulu or something like that. And I can get you that link also.
That'd be great, and we'll continue updating people. I just typed in here the details of that, so folks that can get over to Hillsborough can also take a look at it there. And thanks again so much for taking the time to come on and really give us the whole rundown, Donna. This is great. And I learned something, and I even read a bunch of the stuff, but I also know that we have a lot more to learn, but we have a lot of work to do and a lot of money to raise. And we should get busy with that.
Right. Well, thank you. And I appreciate everybody's help and money and volunteer time, because this is for the kids, and it's really here to help. And so we really need to have this happen so that parents can be involved in their kids' education where they should be, and that our kids get a great opportunity and a great education.
Thanks again, Donna, and good luck with everything. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And we'll talk to you in January, maybe closer to the time of this screening, and we can do an update and see what
that'd be great.
Promote the event and keep people informed as to what they can do to make this happen.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You bet. Have a good night. Thanks, everyone, for watching. By the way, please share this show with everyone you can. There are so many people who need to hear this information. Don't be selfish. Even before the holidays, you can deliver some good news.
Donate.
That's right. And donate. Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Good night.